John Wells, our quiet sentinel, sat in solitude within his sepia-toned office. Age had woven its tale upon his countenance, each wrinkle an etching of past sorrows and muted victories. His eyes, once sparkling sapphires, were now as deep and tranquil as the azure sea under a storm's shroud, laden with untold stories of survival and perseverance. His office, an old converted boathouse by the river, bore a striking resemblance to him. It was not perfect. Time had worn the paint, the woodwork was chipped, but like him it stood, silent and steadfast against the onslaught of time. His loyal companion, Biscuit, an aged German shepherd, was as much a part of this place as the weathered wood and antiquated furniture. The dog lay curled up on a patchwork quilt near the crackling hearth, providing a soothing, warm rhythm to the silence that lay draped around them. A knock on the door, gentle yet firm, disrupted their tranquility. Mrs. Darcy, the matron of the local homeless shelter, stood at the threshold, her face etched with worry and creased with the premature lines of hard-earned wisdom. As the cold Michigan wind swirled in, it carried with it the faint scent of a world beyond John's solitude. The damp earth, the late autumn leaves, and the ceaseless whispers of life in Farmington Hills. With heavy, expectant dialogue, she revealed the purpose of her visit. "They're gone, Mr. Wells. Just vanished, like ghosts." Her voice trembled and her hands clenched and unclenched in her lap as she shared the unnerving details of the missing homeless people. A series of photographs slid across the worn mahogany of John's desk, each face frozen in a moment of deceptive normalcy, unaware of the uncertainty that awaited them. He picked up each image, studying the faces and their vacant eyes. The reality of the situation nestled in the back of his mind, cold and foreboding. Yet something stirred within him, a sense of duty perhaps, or a call from a life he thought he had left behind. A silent agreement was made then, a pact sealed by his nod and the slightest hint of resolve flickering back to life in his weathered eyes. As Mrs. Darcy left, he sat alone in the quiet office once more, the spectral faces from the photographs staring back at him. The shadows of the room seemed to deepen, the silence growing heavier, and his isolation more profound. Outside, Farmington Hills slumbered, unaware of the malevolent undercurrent threading through its streets. He knew he had just embarked on a journey that promised to upend the tranquility of his seclusion. His once tranquil existence held a new purpose, bringing forth an intriguing blend of dread and anticipation. As he looked over the photographs one last time, he felt the weight of the responsibility he had undertaken, and with a sigh of steely resolve, the curtain fell on our sentinel, standing at the precipice of the unknown. Dawn arrived, streaking the morning sky with pastel hues. The quaint suburb of Farmington Hills awoke to the song of robins, a stark contrast to the harsh melody that played in the corners of John's mind. Still reeling from yesterday's meeting with Mrs. Darcy, he set out to explore the underbelly of the city, a foreign world hidden behind the postcard-like facade of the sleepy town. He traversed the town, his shadow lengthening and shortening with the sun's movement, becoming a silent witness to his quest. He wound through tree-lined streets, past quaint homes, and into the urban arteries of the city. Each turn revealed new layers of Farmington Hills. The pristine white picket fences gave way to graffiti-scarred buildings, the well-groomed lawns replaced by cramped alleys. As he moved further into this urban labyrinth, his senses were assaulted by the raw tapestry of city life. The acrid smell of burnt oil, the cacophonous symphony of traffic, the neon graffiti scrawling whispers of dissent on the city's face. Rumors of the occult began to stir, whispered in hushed voices that echoed in dimly lit taverns and slipped through the cracks of tightly shut doors. These were no longer stories contained within the pages of a sensational tabloid, but testimonies of genuine fear and apprehension. John sought out the missing people's acquaintances, delving into their lives through heavy dialogues that felt like requiems. Billy was an okay guy, you know? A little off his rocker, but he wouldn't just skip town. Or, I saw something, a shadow, a figure. It wasn't natural, and then she was gone. Despite his initial skepticism, the pattern was becoming disturbingly apparent. A common thread linked these disappearances: their last known locations, the similar timing, the cryptic symbol that kept surfacing in his investigations. He was standing before an ominous graffiti on an alleyway wall. The symbol, a grotesque amalgamation of lines and curves, gnawed at his sanity. It was the same symbol he had seen etched on a scrap of fabric found in one of the victims' makeshift homes. This symbol, this echo from the void, was the harbinger of a chilling realization that gripped him. The urban legend might not be a myth after all. As the sun dipped below the cityscape, he was left alone in the encroaching darkness. The cryptic symbol, a grotesque testimony to his growing fears. The quiet he once cherished had now become an unsettling reminder of the insidious evil that lurked within the city's heart. He was but a solitary sentinel, standing against the deafening echo of the void. The revelations of the past few days had transformed John's world, skewing reality into a grotesque shadow of its former self. His nightmares, once a realm of personal fears and past traumas, became haunted by nebulous figures and cosmic horrors. His sleep was no longer a sanctuary, but an insidious realm that mirrored the terror in the streets of Farmington Hills. Awake, he moved through the world like a specter. His once familiar neighborhood now bore an uncanny undercurrent that coiled around him. The once comforting silence of his office had now become oppressive, the space dominated by his growing collection of evidence. Tattered bits of clothing, cryptic symbols, and haunting testimonies. His reality was intersecting with a nightmare. It manifested in flickers in the corner of his eyes, whispers in the wind, and an unnerving feeling of being watched. Each interview, each testimonial, brought him closer to an undeniable truth. The cult was not a figment of imagination, but a reality gnawing at the peripheries of his world. One conversation stood out. A man riddled with an uncontrollable tremor recounted his encounter with the cult, his voice a ragged whisper. They were chanting. It wasn't human. And there was something else, something monstrous. It stared at me, through me. These revelations were a bitter pill to swallow for John, a disturbing blend of fear and morbid fascination. They churned within him, a concoction of emotions he grappled to understand. The mystery that had started as a puzzle was now an abyss that gazed back at him, threatening to consume him. He discovered a potential meeting place for the cult. Armed with cryptic clues and a deteriorating sense of self-preservation, he found himself standing before an abandoned warehouse at the city's edge. It loomed before him, a silent sentinel of the monstrous reality hidden within its bowels. The moon cast long shadows over the decrepit building, and he was left on the precipice of a harrowing plunge into the abyss. The wind carried whispers from the void, sending a shiver down his spine. The world was no longer what it seemed, and as he stood there, he knew he was on the brink of the inconceivable. The silence of the early hours was punctuated only by the ominous creaking of the warehouse door as John pushed it open. The darkness inside was an entity of its own, consuming all but the scant shafts of moonlight that dared to penetrate its domain. A fetid air hung about the place, mingling with the smell of decayed wood and stale water, a testament to the building's long abandonment. Yet underneath these familiar scents, there lurked an unplaceable odor, metallic, alien, and horribly wrong. He descended further into the maw of the warehouse, flashlight in hand, his heart a war drum against his ribs. He was no stranger to fear, but what he felt now was an abhorrent cocktail of terror and curiosity. His light danced across the cavernous room, revealing unholy etchings on the walls, shadows flickering in a grotesque parody of life. A dreadful realization swept over him as he discovered the remnants of disturbing rituals, symbols etched into the concrete floor, candle stubs and ominous artifacts. The silence was broken by a low murmur, a sound that seemed to rise from the bowels of the earth. He followed it to its source, the sound growing into an unholy cacophony of voices chanting in an alien tongue. Through a crack in the door, he glimpsed the cult's congregation. Arrayed in tattered robes, they knelt before a monstrous entity that defied description, a horrific tapestry of writhing shadows and gnashing maws. Their chants filled the air, a maddening crescendo that assaulted his sanity. Paralyzed by the sight, he could only watch, the reality of the cosmic horror gnawing at his comprehension. Yet he found within himself the will to act. Using his phone, he captured what he could of the ritual and the cult members. The digital images, a mockery of the living nightmare before him. As if sensing his intrusion, the entity shifted, its many eyes seeming to peer into the very marrow of his soul. Fear drove him back into the shadows, fleeing from the monstrous spectacle. He sent the evidence to the local authorities and prayed they'd arrive in time. The walls of the warehouse shuddered as if alive, the reality around him rippling under the weight of the entity's presence. He fled, the world around him warping, the very fabric of reality strained to its breaking point. He emerged into the night, the warehouse collapsing behind him, reduced to rubble and dust under the inescapable morning sun. The cult's horrific reality was trapped within its ruins, silenced for now. Surviving this ordeal left him scarred, forever haunted by the knowledge of cosmic entities beyond human comprehension. His world had been irrevocably altered. The silent suburban town of Farmington Hills was no longer a sanctuary, but a thin veil over an abyss of unimaginable horrors. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like it and subscribe to our channel, where you can find more similar stories, and click on the bell icon to never miss one. There is plenty more cosmic horror to come from the Eldritch Tales Factory. Stay tuned, and until next time.